So there I was, sitting in this dimly lit comedy club called Chuckles and Chill, watching this guy absolutely kill it on stage. Clarence had this natural confidence that just drew you in. You know, he wasn't the tallest or the most conventionally attractive guy in Portland. But when he grabbed that microphone, something just clicked. I could tell he was going places, had that hungry look of someone who wasn't going to stay stuck doing day jobs forever. And honestly, I've always had good instincts about people's potential. After his set, I made sure to position myself near the bar where he'd have to walk past. Not in some desperate, obvious way. I'm way too smart for that kind of amateur move. I just happened to be there, looking effortlessly put together in my black dress that showed just enough to be intriguing. When he came over to order a drink, I complimented his bit about dating apps, and we ended up talking for hours. He was funny, ambitious, and clearly impressed by how much I understood about comedy timing and social media marketing. Those first few months were actually pretty great. I helped him film TikToks, gave him feedback on his material, and made sure he looked good in all his posts. I mean, the guy had talent, but he needed someone with actual social media savvy to help him package it right. His follower count literally doubled after I started managing his online presence. I'd spend hours editing videos, writing captions, figuring out the best posting times, basically doing the work of a professional social media manager for free because I believed in us. Clarence started getting more bookings at different clubs around the city. I'd show up to every single performance, laughing at all the right moments, networking with other comedians and club owners. I was basically his unofficial publicist and biggest supporter, rolled into one. When other girlfriends would complain about their boyfriend's hobbies taking up too much time, I'd just roll my eyes. Like, maybe try actually supporting your partner's dreams instead of being a drain on their energy. The proposal happened about 2 years in, right there on stage at Chuckles and Chill during one of his regular spots. He worked it into his set so smoothly, started talking about commitment and relationships, then got down on one knee right there under the spotlight. The audience went absolutely crazy. Everyone was filming, and I could feel all those cameras focused on us. It was like something out of a movie, except better because it was real and it was happening to me. That TikTok video exploded overnight. 400,000 views, thousands of comments, shares across every platform. People were calling it the most romantic proposal they'd ever seen. And suddenly we were this viral couple that everyone wanted to follow. My Instagram followers jumped by like 15,000 in a week. I started getting messages from wedding planners, photographers, even a few small brands wanting to collaborate. It felt like we were finally getting the recognition we deserved. Planning the wedding was actually kind of fun at first. We booked this gorgeous venue in the Pearl District, started putting together guest lists, tasting cakes, all that typical stuff. But the more we got into the details, the more I started thinking about what marriage actually meant. Like, really thinking about it. Here I was, 26 years old, about to legally bind myself to one person for the rest of my life. And for what? Because that's what people expect you to do after a certain amount of time together. I started doing research about alternative relationship structures, reading articles about successful couples who'd found ways to make things work without all the traditional restrictions. There were tons of stories about people who'd opened up their marriages and ended up stronger than ever. It made so much sense when you actually thought about it logically, instead of just following whatever your parents' generation decided was normal. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that Clarence and I were mature enough to handle something more sophisticated than basic monogamy. We were both attractive, social people with healthy appetites. Why should we limit ourselves when we could have security and excitement? I spent weeks thinking about how to bring it up, planning exactly what I'd say to make him understand that this could actually strengthen our relationship instead of threatening it. So there we were on our couch, the gorgeous gray sectional I'd picked out because Clarence's taste in furniture was basically non-existent, and I decided it was time for an adult conversation about our future. I waited until he was relaxed, maybe a little buzzed from the beer he'd had with dinner. And then I just went for it. Babe, what do you think about an open marriage? The look on his face was like I just suggested we move to Mars or something equally ridiculous. He actually did this little laugh, but not the good kind. The kind that meant he thought I was joking. Yeah, sure. And after the ceremony, we'll have the reception at Area 51. I could already tell this wasn't going to go as smoothly as I'd hoped. But I pressed on because someone had to be the adult in this conversation. I explained the whole thing, how this could give us both freedom to explore and grow as individuals while still maintaining our core relationship. How lots of successful, intelligent couples were doing this exact same thing. How it didn't mean we loved each other any less. Just that we were secure enough to want each other to be completely fulfilled. It won't change anything between us. I promise. But instead of actually listening to what I was saying, Clarence just sat there getting more and more worked up. His voice got all tight and sarcastic, which was always his go-to when he felt threatened by something he couldn't understand. Yeah, it'll change me from fiancé to ex-fiancé real quick. That's when I realized he was going to be completely unreasonable about this. Here I was, trying to have a mature discussion about our relationship structure, and he was already jumping to threats and ultimatums. Like, couldn't we at least talk through the logistics before he started with the dramatic declarations? I tried explaining that this was about growth and honesty, not about replacing him or finding someone better, but he wasn't hearing any of it. Then he said something that really pissed me off. All right, if you're so innocent, hand me your phone. Excuse me. Since when did asking for an adult conversation about our relationship make me guilty of something? And why did he think he had the right to go through my private messages just because he didn't like a perfectly reasonable suggestion I'd made? My phone was sitting right there, on the coffee table, but the battery was practically dead anyway, and I wasn't about to let him invade my privacy just because he was feeling insecure. Oh, my phone's dead. Oh, my battery's about to explode. Oh, Mercury's in retrograde. Okay. That last part was maybe a little sarcastic, but he was being such a controlling ass about the whole thing. I needed a few minutes to think about whether I really wanted to set this precedent where he could just demand to search through my stuff whenever he felt like it. So I told him to give me 10 minutes to look through it first. Make sure there wasn't anything private or embarrassing that had nothing to do with him. Give me 10 minutes to look through it, and then I'll give it to you. But apparently even that was too much to ask from Mr. Mature Relationship Expert. He just sat there staring at me like I'd confessed to murder or something equally dramatic. Then he got up and started walking toward our bedroom, and I could hear him pulling stuff out of drawers and closets. If this was a test? You failed with flying colors. A test. I mean, okay, maybe part of me did want to see how he'd react to the idea, but that wasn't the point. The point was that we were supposed to be partners who could discuss anything together. And instead he was acting like a jealous teenager who couldn't handle his girlfriend having thoughts and needs that didn't revolve entirely around him. Next thing I know, he's carrying my suitcases and boxes out to the front lawn like I'm some kind of deadbeat roommate getting evicted. My clothes, my books, my makeup, everything just dumped out there for the whole neighborhood to see. Mrs. Patterson from next door was definitely watching through her kitchen window, probably getting her entertainment for the week while my entire life got scattered across the grass. He even took the engagement ring back. Just slid it right off my finger, like the past 2 years meant absolutely nothing to him. Then he called me an Uber like I was some random hookup he needed to get rid of before his wife came home. I kept trying to explain that we could work through this, that he was overreacting to what should have been a simple conversation between two adults who loved each other. But he wouldn't even look at me. The Uber driver was this older guy who kept glancing in the rearview mirror like he was trying to figure out what kind of drama he'd gotten pulled into. I had to give him my friend Jessica's address because I literally had nowhere else to go. 2 years of building a life together, and Clarence just threw it all away because I'd suggested something that threatened his fragile little ego. Jessica was decent about letting me crash on her couch for a while, but I could tell she didn't really get the full situation. She kept asking questions about what had actually happened, like she thought there was more to the story than what I was telling her, which was frustrating because I was being completely honest about everything, and Clarence had just proven that he wasn't mature enough to handle a real relationship with a strong, independent woman who had her own ideas about how things should work. I spent the next few days going over everything in my head, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was just a temporary setback. Clarence was probably feeling embarrassed about how he'd reacted, maybe getting advice from his comedian friends about how he'd blown things out of proportion. Once he had some time to cool down and actually think through what I'd been trying to tell him, he'd realize that I'd been approaching this from a place of love and honesty. But then, that Monday morning, I drove by our old place to see if maybe we could talk things through like adults. His Honda Civic was parked in the driveway, and I just felt this surge of anger looking at it. That stupid car that I'd helped him pick out, that I'd sat in for hundreds of trips to comedy shows and late-night food runs, all those memories. And he'd just thrown them away because he couldn't handle one adult conversation about our future. I don't really remember exactly what happened next. I was emotional. obviously, and maybe not thinking completely clearly. But when I saw that car sitting there like nothing had changed, like he was just going on with his normal life while mine was completely upended, something inside me just snapped. The next thing I knew, there was some damage to the mirror and windshield. And maybe I'd keyed something into the trunk. Just one word: clown. Because that's what he was being about this whole situation. Mrs. Patterson apparently saw some woman in a hoodie near his car that morning. But it's not like she could identify anyone specifically. And honestly, Clarence probably had lots of people who were upset with him if this was how he handled conflict in other areas of his life too. A few weeks later, I realized I needed to take some kind of legal action to protect my interests. I'd put tons of work into building Clarence's social media presence, and that viral proposal video was still getting views and generating revenue. I'd been the one filming most of his TikToks, editing them, managing his posting schedule, basically doing the work of a professional social media manager. It seemed only fair that I should get some compensation for all that unpaid labor, especially since he was still benefiting from the audience I'd helped him build. And the small claims court process was pretty straightforward. I filed the paperwork, laid out all the work I'd done to support his career, and calculated what a fair percentage of his TikTok revenue would be. I even had screenshots of all the videos I'd helped create, timestamps showing when I'd been the one posting content to his accounts. It was a solid case based on actual contributions I'd made to his success, but the judge was clearly biased toward Clarence from the start. Didn't want to hear about all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into building someone's online presence. Just kept asking technical questions about contracts and formal agreements. Like, since when do couples need legal paperwork to acknowledge each other's contributions to shared projects? The whole thing was obviously rigged in favor of whoever could afford better representation. After I lost the case, my family was incredibly supportive. My aunt posted this long thing on Facebook about how some men just can't handle strong women who know their own worth. And my brother sent some messages to Clarence explaining how he'd screwed over someone who'd only ever tried to help him succeed. It was nice to know that at least some people could see the situation clearly and weren't buying into Clarence's victim act. But Clarence just kept ignoring everyone, even reasonable attempts to communicate. I'd text him things like, "I think we just got off on the wrong foot," or leave voicemails explaining that he was still the love of my life and we could work through this misunderstanding. I even showed up to a few of his shows, thinking maybe seeing me in the audience would remind him of all the good times we'd had together. Instead of being mature about it, he started having me escorted out by security. Like I was some kind of stalker instead of his former fiancé who just wanted to support his career like I always had. He wouldn't even read my messages, just left them all on scene like I wasn't worth 30 seconds of his time to respond. Meanwhile, I'm hearing through mutual friends that his career is actually taking off. Some management company is interested in representing him. He's getting auditions for commercials, basically living the dream that we were supposed to be building together. And here I am, still stuck at Jessica's place, trying to figure out how to rebuild my entire life because one man couldn't handle an honest conversation about relationship structures. The most frustrating part is how everyone acts like I did something wrong by suggesting we open things up. Like wanting your partner to be completely fulfilled and happy is somehow selfish or manipulative. If Clarence had actually listened to what I was trying to tell him instead of immediately jumping to conclusions and dramatic gestures, we could have worked through this together. We could have been one of those couples who figured out how to make things work on their own terms instead of just following whatever society expects. But instead, he chose to throw away 2 years over one conversation, chose to humiliate me in front of the neighbors, ignore my attempts to fix things, and act like I was some kind of criminal for having thoughts and needs that didn't perfectly align with his narrow view of how relationships should work. I still believe that what I suggested could have made us stronger in the long run. Lots of successful couples have figured out how to balance security with freedom, commitment with exploration, but that would have required Clarence to be more emotionally mature than he apparently was ready for. Maybe someday he'll realize what he gave up when he decided to be so inflexible about something that could have brought us closer together. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding and moving forward. Jessica's been pretty cool about me staying here while I figure out my next steps. And I've been working on some freelance social media projects to get back on my feet, or financially. It's not the life I thought I'd be living at this point. But at least I know I was honest about what I wanted, instead of just pretending to be satisfied with something that felt limiting. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Clarence had been willing to actually discuss the open marriage idea instead of immediately shutting it down. if he'd trusted me enough to believe that I was coming from a place of love instead of assuming the worst about my motivations. But I guess some people just aren't ready for that level of emotional sophistication in their relationships. The whole experience has definitely taught me a lot about compatibility and communication. Next time I'm with someone, I'll make sure to have these conversations much earlier in the relationship, before there's so much invested that one disagreement can destroy everything. And I'll look for someone who's secure enough in themselves to handle a partner who has her own ideas about how love should work in the modern world. I still think about Clarence sometimes, especially when I see his posts getting shared around social media. Part of me hopes he's learned something from how badly he handled our situation. That maybe he's grown up enough to realize that pushing away someone who loved him was a mistake. But mostly, I just feel sorry for him, because he let his insecurities cost him the best relationship he's probably ever going to have.